Okay. So we started off by saying that every particle in quantum mechanics has to be described by a wave. And we tried to construct different possible waves for free particles. And the first one that we constructed was a particle moving in one direction, a free particle moving in one direction with a fixed momentum and energy. And this was the wave. And we found that the mod squared of the wave function was a constant, which indicated that the particle has equal probability of being everywhere. So there was no spatial information. So then we used superposition principle by superposing different waves with different values of momentum to produce another wave. And we tried to construct a wave which has got some spatial information and some momentum information. So the first wave that we constructed gave equal weightage to all the momenta, and the wave we obtained was the Dirac delta function. This had full spatial information but no momentum information. Then we moved on to constructing another wave which we will use to represent a realistic particle for which we have some momentum information, some position information, and that was the Gaussian wave packet. So for the Gaussian wave packet, the wave function is given by this kind of a Gaussian function, and the corresponding amplitudes for the various momenta is given by this. So if you take these and calculate the mod square of this, this gives the probability density for the different positions, or this is representative of the probability of finding the particle at some position. This is representative, this represents the probability of finding the particle with some momentum, and we find that the probability of finding the particle at some position is peaked at x equal to 0, it is maximum here, and it has got a spread. The spread in the probabilities of finding the particle is given by b. Larger the value of b, the larger is the spread in this function. So what happens, suppose I have a particle which is described by this wave function, and I make a measurement of the position. I will get some value of x, and the probability of getting any particular value is given by this curve. So the mean value of x will be 0, and if I repeat the experiment 1,000 or 1,000,000 times, I will get different values, and if I plot the number of times I get a particular value, I will get this kind of a distribution. On the other hand, if I have the same state of the particle being described by the same wave function, and I measure the momentum, each time I will get a different value of the momentum, and the momenta will be distributed in this fashion. The center of the distribution is at the momentum equal to 0, and every time I measure it, I will get a different value, and they will be spread around 0. The dispersion or the width of the distribution is decided by h cross by b. It is the denominator in this function which decides the width. And the denominator here is h cross by b. So the width of this is of the order of b, and the width of this is of the order of h cross by b. So if I use delta x to denote the spread in the positions for this particular wave packet, and if I use delta p to denote the spread in the momenta for this wave packet, then I I have this kind of a relation that the spread in position into the spread in momentum is of the order of h cross. This is what we had done in the last class. And this we realized is some kind of a fundamental uncertainty in the accuracy to which we can measure the position and momentum of a particle, which is imposed by the fact that we have to describe a particle by a wave. Now, coming back to the Gaussian wave packet, we may want to describe a particle which is moving, which has a finite value of momentum. Here, this particular wave corresponds to a particle at rest. That is clear from the fact that the distribution of momenta is peaked around the value of momentum equal to 0. And it is symmetrically distributed on both sides of p equal to 0. So the mean value of the momentum for this distribution is 0. So this, you may say, corresponds to what classically we will call a particle with 0 momentum. Now suppose we want to construct a wave function for a state where the particle has got some non-zero momentum. Let us say some value of momentum p naught. So let us first construct that. So that can be constructed by choosing the coefficients a of p in just a slightly different way. So this is the same as the a of p which we had earlier, except that the center is shifted to a value p naught. And this we may interpret as a particle with a mean momentum of p naught. Now what is the wave function corresponding to this? Let us also calculate that. So that can be so we have to integrate over all possible values of momenta, and so we have to take a of p, multiply it with, so first let's put down a of p, which is exponential minus p naught squared b squared by h cross squared, multiply this by e to the power exponential minus I p x by h cross, and integrate over dp divided by square root of 2 pi and n h cross. So this integral will give us the wave function corresponding to this shifted Gaussian. So we now have a Gaussian wave packet where the center on the momentum has been shifted. Now this integral is easy to deal with if you just define u to be p minus p naught. So with this definition, let us write down what is psi of x. So psi of x is now psi x is equal to, we have the same old coefficients, and we have the exponential, the Gaussian now becomes minus u square b square by h cross and here we have exponential minus I u plus p naught x by h cross into du by square root of 2 pi, and we have h cross. This is nothing. We can pull out the factor of exponential minus I into p naught into x by h cross, which is a constant. We can pull that outside, and we have exponential e to the power minus I p naught x by h cross into the wave function which we had when the momentum was centered at 0. So we can write that also, which is this is the wave function if the momentum were centered at 0. So we can express this whole thing in the following way using some kind of brief notation, that psi x centered at p naught is equal to e to the power I p naught x by h cross psi centered at the momentum x. So this is the same old wave function, the same old Gaussian wave packet, where the momentum was centered at the value of 0, multiplied by this phase factor over here. E to the power minus I, that's right. Now, if you look at this factor over here, what does it represent? If forget about this for the time being. This is a plane wave corresponding to a particle moving with the momentum p naught. We are looking at the time instant t equal to 0. So this is the plane wave corresponding to a particle moving with the momentum p naught. So what we find is, if for this particular case, that the wave packet centered at the momentum value p naught, which we may say corresponds to a particle moving with the momentum p naught, is the wave function for the particle at rest into e to the power minus I p naught x by h cross, which is the wave for a particle moving with the momentum p naught. So now what we have is the same Gaussian wave packet multiplied by a plane wave, which corresponds to a particle with this momentum. One could do the same thing. One could shift the particle in space also, and then see what the corresponding amplitudes in momentum correspond to. We shall come back to this when we consider the time evolution of the wave packet. Now let us move on to something slightly different. Let us try to understand why we have these uncertainty relations. We found that there is a fundamental relation between the accuracy to which you can define the position and the momentum of a particle. Let us try to understand why these relations come about. So let us consider a generic kind of superposition of waves with different momenta. So we have a function a of p. Let us plot it here. P and a of p. This function may be centered around some arbitrary value p naught, which is here. And the function, let us say, has got some kind of a shape like this. the function is constant or nearly constant over some range of values delta p. So it is nearly constant over some range of value delta p, and then it falls off. And we can say that the uncertainty in this momentum, in the distributions of momentum, or the accuracy to which we can determine the momentum of the particle is of the order of delta p, because we are superposing states with values of momentum in this range delta p, centered around the value p naught. So the wave function corresponding to this psi x is equal to minus delta p by 2 delta p by 2 e to the power minus I p x by h cross. We can put some p naught plus delta p, p naught minus for the center. It doesn't make a difference. We can, if you want, we can neglect this. It doesn't make a difference to our analysis. Now, so what are we doing? We are superposing waves with different momenta in this range, all with the same amplitude. We want to see how much is the result, how wide is the resulting function in the distribution of x. How wide is the, so this will give me some function in x, and the question we want to ask is how wide is that function going to be. Now if you take the value x equal to 0, let us consider x equal to 0. At x equal to 0, all of these different waves are going to have a phase. Let us call this phase phi. All the phase at x equal to 0 is going to be 0 for all the different values of momenta. So they are all going to add up constructively. So what are we doing? We are adding up the contribution from different values of momenta. And at x equal to 0, they all have the same phase, phi. Phi, the phase is 0. So they all add up constructively. As you change x, what happens? For, let us say, for some other value of x, they will be spread in the phase. And the phase will vary from the value x into delta p by 2 minus x into delta p by 2 to x into delta p by 2. So phase is going to vary between this and this. So for any other value of x which is not x, so let us plot. I can write phase is varying from minus x delta x p by 2 to, sorry, so the phase phi with which the different values of momenta in the range delta p contribute vary between these two values. So if I look at x equal to 0, the phase doesn't change at all over the range of delta p. If I increase the value of x, the range of the phase keeps on increasing. Once I hit some, if I increase x sufficiently large so that this is over the range minus pi to pi, then the contribution from the different momenta will totally cancel out, because I am integrating e to the power phi, where phi goes from minus pi to pi. Or you may say I am integrating sine x over the range minus pi to pi, which is 0. So the first 0, if I look at this integral for different values of x, the first 0 of this function will be reached when x into delta p by 2 is of the order of, there's a h cross here also, so this is of the order of pi. So if you look at the function psi of x versus x, it will be maximum here and then it will fall off, and the first 0 will be hit when this is of the order of pi. Once it crosses pi, so once it crosses pi, then if I increase x further, the contributions will be larger than, will span a range of phases larger than 2 pi, and they will start to cancel out. So for larger values of x, what happens? The contributions from different values of p in the range delta p all cancel out. The oscillations in this phase phi are very fast if I increase x, and they all cancel out. For small values of x, the oscillations add up constructively, these phases add up constructively, and I get some positive or negative, they add up constructively. So based on this argument, we can guess the shape of this function, and this function will look something like this. It will have the first 0 crossing here. After that, it will have some more oscillations, but the values will be much smaller. So the width of this function in x is of the order of, so the x, let us say x0 is the point where it has the first 0 crossing, into delta p by 2h cross is of the order of pi. So if this is x0, twice x0 is what we will call delta x. So delta x is equal to delta, let's see, it is equal to pi to h cross by delta p into 2. It's okay, this is fine, right? So now multiplying delta x with delta p, we get this is equal to 4 into pi into h cross. So in this rough argument which we gave, we find that we can justify why the spread in position and the spread in momentum should be of the order of h cross, which is what we found. So let me recapitulate the argument given once again. If the different amplitudes has a finite width in momentum, I am adding up momenta in this range. These different values of momenta, the waves corresponding to these different values of momenta, add up constructively as long as delta x, as long as x is in some range. Beyond that, the contributions from different value of momenta all cancel out with each other. The phase oscillates very rapidly, and the contributions cancel out, and the resulting function looks something like this. So this function has the first zero crossing roughly at the value x naught, which is given by this. And the uncertainty in x, the spread in x, delta x, is twice of the order of twice x naught, which is this. And then multiplying this with the spread in momenta, we find that it is 4 pi h cross, which is of the order of h cross. So this, we find, results from the fact that we are just superposing waves with different momenta, nothing more than that. And the fact that we have this number h cross. Now, let me also tell you about the fact that in some limit, quantum mechanics should give us classical mechanics. This is known as the correspondence principle. In some appropriate limit, we expect quantum mechanics to give us classical mechanics. So over here, one possibility is that if we mathematically take the limit h cross going to 0, we find that you can define delta x and delta f. You can make either both of them 0 simultaneously, or in the limit of h cross going to 0, you can define the position and momentum of a particle with as much accuracy as you like. So all this uncertainty business comes out because of this factor h cross. And this is one way you can take the limit, but it is only mathematical. Okay. But in the real world, we see that the physical systems under certain circumstances are actually described by classical mechanics. So when the physical system can be described by classical mechanics, when quantum mechanics is important, we shall discuss further as we go on. So having discussed why the uncertainty relation arises and how it is very important, let us move on to something else. Until now, we have been considering a free particle. The fact that the particle was free was built into the dispersion relations which were imposed on the wave. So the fact that the particle was free was imposed through the condition between the energy and the momentum, which in turn imposed this dispersion relation, this relation between the omega and the k for the wave. Now, how do we treat a particle which is not free? What we have been doing until now, you may think of as the quantum analog of Newton's first law of motion, where there are no forces. We just deal with free particles. Now, suppose we go to a situation where the particle is moving in an external potential. So the particle has a force acting on it. How do we incorporate this into quantum mechanics? Well, you might say that we can just modify this expression and replace it by and then see how this changes the dispersion relation. Well, a more convenient and a correct approach is to actually write down a wave equation for the wave which we have been dealing with, which works in both a situation when there is a potential, when there isn't a potential. This is the Schrödinger wave equation. So I will next just write down the Schrödinger wave equation. There is no question of deriving this wave equation, but because it doesn't follow from classical physics. It is something new. Okay. We have introduced the wave already. We have some idea of what the wave represents, how to interpret it physically. Now we are going to go on to an equation which describes the wave when the particle, which tells us how the wave is going to behave when we have a particle moving in an external potential. So the wave equation is I h cross del by del t psi x t is equal to minus h cross square by 2m del square, or this should be r, So the situation we are considering is as follows. We have a particle which is free to move in 3 dimensions. We were restricting ourselves to 1 dimension until now, just for mathematical convenience. Now we have a particle which is free to move in 3 dimensions. Any point in this 3-dimensional space is denoted by this vector r. We have a wave function psi, which is a function of r. So it is defined at every point and a function of t also. We want to solve for this wave function. Psi is called the wave function. And this is the equation which governs the wave function. Physically, it corresponds to a particle moving in an external potential v. V could be a function of time also, but we are not considering that right now. So V is a potential which is defined throughout this region, and we have a particle of mass m moving in this potential. In classical mechanics, you would write down Newton's laws of motion, and you would have a force which would be equal to minus the gradient of this potential. So in Newtonian mechanics, you would require x and the momentum p at some initial time t naught. And then you could use these as initial conditions in the Newton's laws of motion, where you have the force, you have the initial position and initial momentum. You have one equation for the position relating it to velocity, one equation for the equating it to the momentum, one equation for the momentum equating it to the force. You can solve these 2 linear equations, first order equations, get a second order equation and then solve that and find the trajectory, which will be x and p at some later time. And you are all familiar with how to go about doing this. In quantum mechanics, the problem is different. We have a particle moving in an external potential v, same situation. Here we have to be given the initial wave function of the particle psi x naught. Given the initial wave function of the particle, we have to solve this partial differential equation for the wave function to obtain the wave function at some later time. The problem here is deterministic in the sense that given the initial wave function at the time t equal to 0, we can solve this equation and get the wave function at some later time. There is no uncertainty in this. The uncertainty or the probabilistic behavior comes in once you try to interpret the wave function. It is only there that the probabilistic interpretation comes in. As far as the dynamics is concerned, it is all in this partial differential equation, the Schrödinger equation. So let us look at this equation a little carefully. We have I h cross del by del t, the partial time derivative of the wave function, is equal to minus h cross square by 2m, where m is the mass of the particle, del square is the Laplacian acting on psi, plus the potential multiplying psi. You may note that I have not indicated r and t explicitly here, and I will be dropping it at some occasions, but you should always assume that it is there. Okay, so I'm just not writing it here, that's all. So this is the wave equation which we would like to solve. This governs the evolution of the wave function. The uncertainty which I just told you about comes in through the fact that the initial state of the particle is described by a wave. Once the state of the particle is described by a wave, you cannot define, you cannot precisely tell what is the position and the momentum, both. So even initially, you cannot tell what is the position and what is the momentum of the particle absolutely precisely. You have some uncertainty imposed by the fact that the initial state itself is described by a wave. This wave has to be evolved in time by this function. If you want to know what the particle is going to be, like where the particle is going to be later. So even later on you have a wave, and even later on you have this uncertainty in the position, in the momentum. So the whole of quantum mechanics is now in how to interpret the wave function and how to actually solve this equation and find out psi of xt at some later time, given psi of x0 at some initial time. Let us first verify that this actually does give us the solution which we are familiar with in a situation where there is no potential. In a situation where there is no potential, the equation becomes I h cross del del t psi r t is equal to minus h cross square by 2m del square psi. Let us take a plane wave solution, which is the simplest solution. So let us take this kind of a plane wave solution as a trial solution and put it in this equation. So if we put this into this equation, the left hand side, which is a I h cross into a time derivative of this function will give us the same function into the same function into I omega. Right. So this is equal to minus h cross omega. And if you look at the left hand side, we have minus h cross square by 2m Laplacian square of psi r t. Now each time this operator, the gradient operator, acts on this, we get minus I into k. So this Laplacian is the gradient operator, the nabla operator squared. So this is equal to minus h cross square by 2m, and here we have minus I k squared into psi itself, which is, so this minus goes away with this, I square is a minus, so we have minus h cross square k square by 2m. Well, it's the k dot k. The square means k dot k. Okay, the square of a vector is k dot k. So this is what the right hand side is. If we equate the left hand side to the right hand side, we get the original dispersion relation which we had for a free particle, h cross omega is equal to h k square by 2m. So we find that we recovered the known result for a free particle. Now we have to solve this for different potentials. Solving this equation for solving the Schrödinger equation for different potentials shall be what we shall be doing for the next few lectures, or you may say the rest of the course. We shall be actually solving Schrödinger's equations for different kinds of potentials. Just like in classical mechanics, you look at the motion of particle in different kinds of forces, under different kinds of forces. So for most of the remainder of the course, we shall actually be solving Schrödinger equations for particles moving in different kinds of potentials. There are only a very few number of potentials for which you can actually analytically solve Schrödinger's equation. So we shall do some of these exact solutions which are known. Now, how do we interpret this solution? So let me draw the picture again. So what we obtain by solving the Schrödinger equation is psi at r and t. How do we interpret the wave function? So in the three-dimensional situation, the wave function is interpreted as follows. The probability of finding the particle in a small volume element dv over here. So if this is the volume element dv, which is dx, dy, dz, the probability of finding the particle in this small volume element dv is given by, so the dp, which is a function of r, is equal to mod psi r squared dv. So this is how we interpret the wave function in the three-dimensional situation. It is just the same as the interpretation in the one-dimensional situation. And this quantity psi r t psi star r t, where star denotes the complex conjugate, is the same as this quantity over here, is represented by this quantity rho, where rho is the probability density. Just like the density into a small volume element dv gives us the mass in that volume, similarly the probability density into the small volume element gives us the probability of finding the particle in that small volume element at the point, centered at the point r. Now, the total probability of finding the particle in this region of space is 1, because there is only one particle and we know that it is somewhere in this region of space. So the particle has to be somewhere here, so the total probability of finding it should be 1. So this imposes the condition that the integral over the whole volume of the probability density, this integral has to be 1. The total probability of finding the particle somewhere is 1, which imposes this condition. So this is called the normalization of the wave function. So all the wave functions which we are going to deal with are going to be normalized. So this is called normalization. Sometimes we do encounter wave functions that cannot be normalized. For example, for a plane wave, we found that for this plane wave, the mod square of psi is a constant. In this case, it is moving along one dimension. So if you integrate this from minus infinity to infinity, you get infinity. So you cannot normalize this kind of a wave function. Okay, we will continue in the next class.